If you are worried you have Lyme disease, or just like the outdoors, and want the peace of mind of knowing whether you have Lyme disease or not, there is a new Lyme screening test based on decades of research by Dr. Richard Marconi, a professor at VCU Medical Center. For more information, visit glymedx.com, that's glymedx.com, or email at info@glymedx.com.
Infectious diseases, research, medicine, health. Welcome to Outbreak News Interviews. And now, broadcasting from the Outbreak News Skylar Studios in beautiful West Central Florida, here is your host, microbiologist and editor of OutbreakNewsToday.com, Robert Harriman.
Hey everybody, it's Robert here, and welcome to the latest installment of news and interviews about worms and germs. This is Outbreak News Interviews, and encourage you also to check out the website, OutbreakNewsToday.com, for your news from all around the globe. Now, this is from the inner jacket cover notes for the book, Let Them Eat Dirt. In the 200 years since we discovered that microbes causes infectious diseases, we've battled to keep them at bay. But a recent explosion of scientific knowledge has led to undeniable evidence that early exposure of these organisms is beneficial to a child's well-being. Our modern lifestyle, with its emphasis on hyper-cleanliness, is taking a toll on children's lifelong health. Well, joining me now is the co-author of Let Them Eat Dirt, Saving Your Child from an Oversanitized World, is B. Brett Finlay, PhD. Dr. Finlay is the Peter Wall Distinguished Professor at the University of British Columbia. Dr. Finlay, welcome to the show, sir.
Hi.
Let's go ahead and start out with just like a little overview. What's the overarching message for readers?
Yeah, I mean, like the book cover said, for a century we've known that microbes cause disease. So we've been on a campaign to get rid of microbes, and affectionately called germs. And this include, antibiotics, vaccines, sanitation, clean water, clean food, hand sanitizer, you name it. And this has been remarkably effective in getting rid of many of the infectious diseases that we saw a century ago. The problem is that I'm sort of calling it hyper-hygiene, is that in our quest to get rid of these bad microbes, we're also eliminating ones that were sort of collateral damage. And what the last decade or so has taught us is that, yes, there are some nasty microbes out there, but there's an awful lot of them that are actually living in and on us, that we knew they lived there, but we didn't know what they did. In the last 10 years, there's just been an explosion of knowledge. These things are actually needed for our normal health, and we've evolved with these things. So to develop a normal immune system, to develop a normal brain, all these things, you need all these microbes. And in our quest to get rid of all these nasty ones, we're now faced with the concept that we have eliminated many other microbes that our grandparents had, for example, when they were kids. And so this is now having big consequences in the Western world diseases, if you can call them that. So obesity, diabetes, asthma, inflammatory bowel disease. All the ones that we see, around in our day-to-day society where we don't see infectious disease anymore. The overriding message is that we need to ease off in our quest to get rid of all microbes and realize there's many beneficial ones, and we have to sort of balance the hygiene with the, screwing up the beneficial microbes.
Yeah. Now, in the second chapter, you title it A Newly Discovered Organ, the Human Microbiome. So are you equating the human microbiome to the cardiovascular system?
Well, so what we now realize is there's an awful lot of microbes living in and on us. So if you go and you try and culture feces, for example, you put on a plate, you won't grow very many microbes. A few will grow up, very few, because they don't like oxygen, for example. But with the advent of DNA sequencing, we've now been able to basically characterize these microbes without actually growing them. What we realized is that there's at least as many microbes in and on us as there are human cells. And these things have 15 times more DNA than we have human DNA in our body. And so what we're now realizing is that they live all over us, wherever the body is exposed to the outside. So that includes the skin, the head, things like this, but it also includes the gastrointestinal tract and the oral tract and things. So, and we now realize this, quote, organ has a function, and actually many functions, and so that's kind of why it's being equated to being sort of a new organ, because it has many properties. It helps in our food digestion and helps in many aspects of our normal day-to-day life, really. So we're not the ones that named it a new organ, but it's certainly a concept that's worth considering.
Yeah. You kind of touched on this in your introductory message. What are some of the problems for kids not being exposed to good microbes and the overuse of antibiotics and the like?
Yeah, so I mean, there's several that are now being associated with it, and it seems like every week there's another study, hinting at things. Mm-hmm. So what we know fundamentally is that early life microbial exposure is really important for immune system to develop properly. And if you don't get exposed to these microbes, you have problems in that area. So this includes problems in, say, asthma and food allergies, for example. And our work has shown that there's some critical microbes that you really need in your 3 months of age, and you don't have them. Basically, your immune system's pushed towards more allergic, asthmatic type thing. Another thing they do is they digest our food, and when you eat the Western diet of white flour, white sugar type things, you're actually starving many of the microbes, and this is being directly associated with obesity. So you can do fecal transfers from obese mouse to a thin mouse, and you can make that thin mouse gain weight just by transferring these microbes. There's some really interesting studies coming out on how the microbes affect brain development. And if you take at least animals that don't have microbes in them, we call them germ-free, these things, their brains don't develop normally and have big problems. And, if you take an anxious or a stressed or depressed mouse, do a fecal transfer into normal mice, they become anxious, stressed, or depressed just by transferring the feces. So we don't know all the details yet, but what we realize is that we have evolved with these microbes as just, this is how humans, think of how ancestors, and think back 1,000 years, how microbes would be on people. And then just in the last century, in the last very few years, actually, we've really deprived our bodies of this normal, what was considered normal in our evolution. And so that's where we're starting to see all these effects come from.
Mm-hmm. And so the large numbers of allergies and asthma in the developed world, things that you're not seeing in the developing world, that is really explained by what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, there's this really neat curve that basically lists pretty much many of the infectious diseases over the last 50 years, and it doesn't matter really which one you pick. In the developed countries, it basically is gone, it's sloping down to the right, it's decreasing. You can then overlay another curve of the diseases we see in society. So as I said, this is like asthma, allergies, obesity, diabetes, inflammatory bowel disease, autism, IBS, anxiety, stress. Every one of those curves goes in the exact opposite direction. And, sometimes we call the hygiene hypothesis that we're just living too clean, we're just too hygienic, and we're not being exposed to the microbes we should be. And now the science, at least in the last 5 years or so, has become very strong. There's actually microbes playing a major component in all those diseases.
Mm-hmm. Now, you write in the book that some very recent research shows that microbes may pay a visit to the baby prior to birth. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so this is a bit of a contentious area. I mean, everyone thinks that the womb is sterile, but again, with DNA sequencing, we can find microbial signatures pre-birth. Whether no one's been able to culture live microbes out of the fetus yet, but there are microbial signatures there. That just means there's microbial DNA. It doesn't prove there's live bacteria there. So that's actually a pretty hot button contentious area right now, that you're colonized by microbes pre-birth. What we do know is that the mother's microbes, when she's pregnant, play a major role in the fetus in utero. For example, if you're a third trimester mother, let's pretend you're a thin woman, and you just way overeat because you're pregnant, you don't care, and you finally don't have to diet. And if you gain too much weight, more than you should, your microbes in the mother go to an obese microbiota, and the second that kid is born, that kid inherits the mother's microbes. That kid is much more prone to becoming obese just by the mother's microbes they acquire on the way out. Similarly, when you're born, if you're born by C-section versus vaginal delivery, just that simple event of how you enter the world, that gives you a 20% higher rate of getting asthma than if you're born vaginally. So C-section is a higher risk for asthma. So there's other studies showing that the mother's maternal microbiome is doing lots of things influencing how the fetus develops. Whether or not there's actually microbes actually in the fetus, as I say, that's still under debate. But I think we all admit that the microbes in the mother's gut and elsewhere can make molecules that can seep across the placental barrier and get to the fetus and then affect its development.
Yeah. And concerning the pregnant woman, how does the normal microbiome affect her?
Well, it does. And like I said, we're talking pregnancy. What happens naturally is as you go into third trimester, the mother's microbiome tends a little bit towards obesity because this actually helps the fetus gain weight. And the microbes are actually more efficient at helping out with the weight. But just in terms of adult microbes in general, we know these things have a major, major role in many aspects of health and disease. And for example, if you take the list of the top 10 reasons why the average Canadian American dies, 9 of those 10 actually now have microbial links. We know they're tightly linked, say, to atherosclerosis, which leads to heart attacks and strokes. They're very tightly linked to dementia, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. And it's a bit scary in a sense that many diseases that you would never dream would have micro components are now being shown they actually do have a major role to play. So it's not just early in life that these things have an effect. It's pretty much all through your life. And then post-65, your microbes really fall off a cliff in terms of what they don't look healthy anymore. And there's a lot of discussion that this could be influencing how we age. And if you do something about it, maybe you can even influence healthy aging.
All right, let's hear a word from our sponsor. For many years, we have been waiting for a Lyme disease test that actually works. After decades of research by Dr. Richard Marconi, a professor at the Medical Center of Virginia Commonwealth University, a breakthrough test has been developed. The GLD test, recently launched by Global Lyme Diagnostics, is based on Dr. Marconi's science. For more information, visit glymedx.com, that's glymedx.com, or email them at info@glymedx.com. Dr. Finlay, can you please discuss the importance of breast milk for the baby's microbiota?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all heard the expression breast is best, and traditionally we've thought that we know breast milk contains many nutrients that are thought to feed the kid, and also contains mother's antibodies, which are protective against infections in the first part of a child's life. Actually, what we now know about breast milk is that it is changing, that we always thought it was nutritious for the kid. Well, we now realize that many of the components of breast milk, actually the majority of the components of breast milk, are not capable of being broken down by humans. They're actually being broken down by microbes within the infant. And so, ironically, you're not just feeding the kid, you're feeding the microbes that then feed the kid. And these microbes that are doing this, they are found, for example, when you're born fecally and vaginally. These microbes are key for breaking down breast milk. The other real turn of events in terms of breast milk knowledge is that everyone assumed breast milk was pretty sterile. And what we now realize that no, indeed, there's actually microbes in there. And these are microbes that are, again, be involved in breaking down breast milk components. And at least in animal studies, you can put labeled microbes into breastfeeding mice, and these things will actually come out in the breast milk. So not only are you feeding the kid nutrients, you're actually feeding the microbes that then help break the nutrients down further.
Okay, so I guess we've come to the conclusion that kids can be too clean. So should a child be allowed to put something in their mouth that they dropped on the ground?
Yeah, this gets back to what we originally said about the hygiene balance. Like, how do you balance infectious risk versus microbial acquisition? So if it's on your kitchen floor, whatever they drop the soother, put it back in their mouth. There's actually a study showed that if you put the soother in your parent's mouth and then the kid's mouth versus go and wash it off, those that put it in the parent's mouth and back in the kid's mouth actually had decreased rates of asthma and obesity. Now, if that soother is bouncing around a dirty subway station or through a pool of urine or something, you really got to. So there's a lot of common sense to it, and this can be applied to a lot of things, like even hand sanitizer, for example. Which, as you probably know, the FDA has now basically banned it because it's for many uses because it doesn't work. Soap and water works just fine, and the continual use of a hand sanitizer. You see these women in playgrounds; everyone's got a bottle of it hanging off their diaper bag, and every time the kid moves from a swing to the slide or whatever, they get their hands sanitized. There's no data to say that's good, and there's more data to say that's not good. Now, on the other hand, if your kid is in daycare and every kid has diarrhea in the daycare except yours, and you definitely want to think about hygienic practices and wiping hands. The same as if you're in a hospital setting where there's immunocompromised people, that you really should be using this hand sanitizers. But used on a daily basis, for example, I just say lose it and, have a little more common sense. What does the woman that lives, let's say there's a woman, she lives on the 22nd floor of a condominium in downtown, wherever, and, she had to deliver by C-section for medical reasons. She had mastitis, so she couldn't breastfeed, had to bottle feed. The kid's daycare is next door, it's on the 21st floor. Where is that child going to get the microbes that humans have always evolved with? And I think that's really a concern that we are not exposing our bodies to the microbes that we've evolved with, and we're taking that chunk of the piece of the evolution of humans right out of there. And I think it's having unforeseen consequences in our quest to clean everything up.
Yeah. Let's talk about diet real quick. What kind of diet is best for enhancing the human microbiome?
Yeah, there's been a lot of studies showing on this, and generally speaking, it's what you'd expect. So it's nuts, legumes, fruits, vegetables, all the stuff your mother said is good for you. It's actually good for your microbiota. So unfortunately, the diet that we tend to eat in North America is not good for the microbiota because we eat white sugars and white flours and processed foods, and these are already pretty much broken down. So they're actually absorbed way up in the small intestine and the top parts of the large intestine, yet the most microbes are way down at the bottom of the large intestine. So they're actually not getting nutrients even though you've eaten something. So when you eat these more complex type foods, fruits, vegetables, nuts type things, these things are not easily broken down by us. Many of them we can't break down, and they trickle down to the microbes living deep within the gut. And that's the type of microbes that are being shown again and again to be beneficial for health, and they're also the ones that prevent against obesity and the related diabetes and things. So things like you hear about the Mediterranean diet, for example. That's a very healthy diet, and so it's when you look around at what we eat in our society, once you know these kind of things, you cringe a bit because we're not doing our microbes a favor eating the way we do.
Now, you have a whole chapter dedicated to vaccines. What's your stand on vaccine use?
Well, I'm very pro-vaccine. I'll say that right up front. I think the science, being a scientist, the science that's shown, it's been proven fraudulent about all the claims made against autism, et cetera. I think the vaccines have done. The problem is people don't go and talk to someone that's lived in a pre-vaccine area when you might get, smallpox, or you could get polio, and you can spend your rest of life in an iron lung. Mm-hmm. And I think our society has just gotten way away from reality in what these diseases can do to kids. And, I know of a case locally here where parents just were, for religious reasons, against vaccination. This child got Haemophilus influenza, meningitis, which basically destroyed the kid's brain, and the kid is a vegetable all their life because of this decision. And I think vaccines are wonderful in terms of preventing these diseases, and I think anyone that says otherwise should look closely at the science, and I think they should take a cold look at all the data, and they're overwhelming in favor for society.
Very good. And I guess finally, Dr. Finlay, any final thoughts or advice you'd like to give to the listener?
Yeah, I think we've entered a new chapter in thinking how we live. Everyone wants to generally live healthier. At least most people want to live healthier and do things, and especially with kids, you want to do the very best thing for your kids. And I think we have to rethink. Up until now, the very best thing is never let your kids get anywhere near anything dirty. The cleaner you can keep them, the better off they're going to be. And I think that taboo has to be removed, and we have to enter this world of balance that if it's not really an infectious risk, let the kid be a kid, play in the dirt, stick a stone in its mouth. The kids have been doing this for eons. And, I jokingly say kids are like Hoovers. They just put everything in their mouth. And if that was so bad for us, we would have evolved not to put anything in our mouth, I think. And so I think you got to take a balance to this and realize these microbes they're just part of us. This is normal. It's not abnormal. And we have to embrace that and then, think about our lifestyles and what we're doing and, putting antibiotics in chickens and cows to increase their growth weight, this is not good from our microbial point of view. And, if you have a viral ear infection, that kid doesn't need antibiotics. Maybe you might want to wait a day and make sure it doesn't spread. And maybe you don't need antibiotics, for example. So more common sense instead of this rabid, over hygienic type practices we've somehow incorporated into the way we raise kids.
Yeah. Excellent. The book is Let Them Eat Dirt, Saving Your Child from an Oversanitized World by Dr. B. Brett Finlay and Dr. Marie-Claire Arrieta. And it can be found on Amazon and other book outlets. Thank you, Dr. B. Brett Finlay, for your time and expertise, sir. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.